She begins early to examine race, particularly white-black relations in her Tribune pieces. She begins with her review of Frederick Douglass's recently published Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, published in 1845. She finds the book and its author, escaped slave, abolitionist, gifted orator, wholly admirable. And that's no shock, considering that the Transcendentalists were very public with their anti-slavery beliefs. But in her review, Fuller describes Douglass as a man of, quotes, strong character, uncommon talents. His narrative is an excellent piece of writing, she says. It should be prized as a specimen of the powers of the black race, which prejudice persists in disputing. So she's not anti-slavery, she's looking at racism, and she is critiquing it. William Lloyd Garrison wrote an introduction to this narrative. However, Fuller finds Garrison's ultraism and come-outer sentiments too radical, along with his, quote, violent invective. Although Garrison deserves her respect, she says, for his motives, and his course has been a noble one, it seems, quote, Fuller, he can no longer pitch his voice on a key agreeable to common ears. Well, you don't think of it. The Liberators started in 1831, and now we're all the way to 1845. And maybe she's saying Garrison's invective has become a little bit counterproductive. You don't have to agree with her, but isn't she interesting? She has a real ear for this. Douglass, on the other hand, she says, seems very just and temperate and will thus be extremely influential. She's right. Fuller then levels her sights on, whoops, got them in the wrong order, levels her sights on other Christian ministers, and she says, she talks about the inconsistencies of slaveholding churchgoers, which cry out to heaven. These are clergymen who today command slaves to obey a gospel which they will not allow them to read, and yet they call themselves Christians. Fuller is always interested in exposing hypocrisy. She concludes this review, we wish that everyone may read Douglass's book and see what a mind might have been stifled in bondage had he not escaped. Later the same year, in a short piece entitled Lyceum of New Bedford, Mass., Fuller continues her critique of racism, even in New England, commenting on the exclusion of blacks, quote, even the most respectable from Lyceum membership in New Bedford. She says they may attend lectures only if they, quote, confine themselves to a particular part of the house. Fuller is incensed, and she praises Ralph Waldo Emerson and Charles Sumner for refusing to lecture in New Bedford because of that exclusion. There are many, many other examples at this particular time in New England and elsewhere of the exclusion of black people from, for example, from membership in the Park Street Church, where William Lloyd Garrison gave his first abolitionist speech. Would not sell them a pew to a black family. It was a scandal at the time. This was not at all uncommon, and for Fuller to speak out against it is another way of her forward-thinking writing. Fuller's critique of the hypocrisy of Christianity about slavery is comparable to her attack on the rich Christian churches in a piece entitled Consecration of Grace Church. Here she deplores the existence of this beautiful New York chapel with its sermons on Christian love and charity, which will not be heard by poor citizens because they could never afford to rent a pew. in the church. Tongue-in-cheek, she says in that article, she suggests an alternative, that churches be built without pews, as in the Middle Ages, so all can kneel together on the floor. The implication is clear. Followers of Christ should inform themselves of the true state of the poor in their midst. They should then adopt, in her words, a generous love for men and a more than commonly Catholic liberality. Give your money. Put your money where your mouth is, she's saying. Class issues are a preoccupation for Fuller in these years. For example, in columns on the rich man and the poor man, she delineates characteristics of exemplary occupants of these stations. The rich man, who has been fortunate in the world of business, is enjoined never to flaunt his material possessions, nor to be rude to those of lower station. Instead, he should, quote, provide good accommodations for hired help, never require them to wear undignified liveries, uniforms, and, this is nice, encourage his wife to be an almoner, counselor, and priestess of the domestic heart. The poor man is instructed to maintain his belief in God and to understand that rank and wealth are only external attributes. He should endeavor to change his lot, but if that does not happen, he should remember he is still eligible to enter the kingdom of heaven. Karl Marx didn't like that one very much, as you all know. At the same time, writing about the same time. Finally, the poor man can take comfort in the knowledge that all work has its own dignity. And after dispensing this advice in this column, Fuller tells one of her stories, many anecdotes in these columns, and I'm sorry I'm sort of skipping over them. They're wonderful, but they would take us till tomorrow to look into them. But anyway, here's one of her anecdotes that she tells in her column on the poor man. It's a story of an elderly black laundress, a person who does laundry, who is resigned to her impoverished lot in life. She expresses her resignation. But she looks forward to leaving her poor accommodations here to join the rest of her family in the next life. So there is this religious comforting that's going on at the same time that she's saying, well, if you can change your situation, and you really... Well, throughout these columns on class, Fuller never suggests that most people are likely to escape their stations, although she allows that sometimes the virtuous poor man or woman might move up to another class by means of hard work, belief in God, and some good fortune. And every so often she loses this mask of acceptance. And at one point she asks society to accept some responsibility for class inequality. She questions, why cannot the human mind, which has just invented the magnetic telegraph, obviate the causes that make acceptance of public charity so essential and so injurious? Let society raise the man who is accepting her bounty instead of degrading him. Now this is in a column entitled Our City Charities, in which she's examining this whole benevolent movement, the movement of charity, giving charity, and talking about, not saying don't do it, but talking about the limitations of condescension and a patronizing attitude for people who are giving charity, that it is not Christian charity if given in that way.